Hi there, I'm Kendra Court. Are you terrified to leave your job, but you feel miserable staying? You're not alone. What if I told you that fear is actually a sign that you're on the right path? Today in this episode, we're going to talk about the fear factor, right? Why does it feel so scary and so overwhelming to make a career change? Why does that feel so scary, and what to do about it? Listen, I have been stuck and scared and paralyzed to change careers multiple times in my life. It's paralyzing, right? That fear, it keeps us stuck. It's kept me stuck, certainly. And for years, despite wanting to move forward, despite wanting to do something different, that fear can really paralyze us in inaction, right? Or prevent us from taking action. And there's a lot of anxiety around the financial risks of changing careers, for instance. There's the fear of disappointing people, disappointing your current boss or your team, right? Not wanting to leave, or disappointing your family, your friends, people that are expecting you to do this thing that you've worked so hard to be doing. There's also the fear of failure. I mean, if you're anything like me, I hate to fail. It sucks. It feels awful. So there's a real fear then that gets generated around that risk of failing. But here's the thing, that inner dialogue that we have in our heads, and clients share this with me all the time, it's that fear inside of us that perpetuates the stuckness, right? My clients talk to me all the time. They share about how the fear takes over, right? And it prevents them from taking action. But listen, that fear response is totally normal. It's biological, right? I mean, our systems have evolved and they're meant to keep us safe. I mean, Lord knows we would have been eaten by saber-toothed tigers or something if we didn't have that inherent fear response, right? To fight, or freeze. If we didn't have that fear response within us, bad things would have happened. And so there's three parts to that fear response, right? That biological inherent fear response that we have. The first one is that it's exaggerated, right? Typically, our fear response is exaggerated for the actual stress trigger, or the fear itself, or the thing that's causing the fear. Our response to it is heightened and exaggerated. It's more than is necessary, right? For me, the other day, we have an old house and there was a mouse that went through the living room and I freaked. And then realized my response to this little mouse running through the living room was actually heightened and exaggerated for what it really was. It's just a little mouse. But that first piece of the fear response is exaggerated, it's heightened, it's over the top. The second part of the fear response is that it takes over the whole screen, as it were. Like it occupies your entire mind. So you can't think about anything else. So my clients talk about this and share with me that when the fear sets in, it takes over. They can't think of anything else. And the third piece of the fear response is that we often tell ourselves that it's bigger than what it is, right? That it's act now, act immediately, right? That's the third part. So it's bigger, it's the whole screen, and it's act now. And here's the thing, when the fear sets in, you don't have to act now, unless you do. I mean, if you're fearful of a burglar entering your house and there's an actual risk of a burglar entering your house, then yes, act now. But when we're talking about fear of changing careers, the fear response is the same whether you've got a mouse in your house, a burglar entering, or you're going to change careers and you fear failure. the body doesn't know the difference, right? It's a fear response. And so it's our job to actually calm the mind down. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Because you don't have to act now. It doesn't have to occupy your whole mind and your whole screen. And it doesn't have to be exaggerated and over the top response based on what you're fearful of. So what are the actual fears about changing careers? Well, what if I can't pay the bills, right? I've got this good job right now. Yeah, I'm unhappy. I'm miserable every day going in. But what if I change and I can't pay the bills? I mean, that's a legitimate fear, right? What if it doesn't work out? That's a legitimate fear. I mean, yeah, maybe it won't. What if it doesn't work out? That is a fear, right? What if nobody will hire me? What if nobody wants what I've got, right? What if I fail? What if I look like an idiot, right? You don't think I've had all of those fears? Of course. Any human does. Those are natural fears that will come up. What if it won't work? What if nobody wants it? What if nobody will hire me? What if I'm too old? What if, I fall flat on my face? So the fear often feels like a mix of doubt, paralysis, sometimes shame. Right? The fear for me was around that shame piece, right? Like, what if I never reach my potential? What if I waste my time and my talent? What if I never figure out what I'm supposed to do? What if I stay stuck doing this role or these roles that don't actually allow me to reach my potential? So what if I've wasted my talent? Right? What if I've wasted my time and my energy and so it's like this fear of sort of missing out on opportunities or missing out on reaching the top of my career, whatever that is supposed to look like. So there's a shame spiral that also happens with fear, right? So fear can feel like paralysis, it can feel like doubt, it can feel like terror, and it can cause us to feel detached or disengaged, right? Certainly disheartened about our situation. But then what happens is we end up playing it safe, right? If you're making decisions based on fear, well, now you're just playing it safe. And that's fine if that's what you want to do. I'm not here to judge, right? If you want to play it safe, by all means. I don't think you would have found your way to my material and to this content if you did want to play it safe. But if you do, by all means. But why does playing it safe often feel like the only option, right? Even if it causes us daily unhappiness, why does playing it safe feel like the only option? Well, because of the risks, right? The risks involved. What if I can't pay the bills? What if I can't do it? What if nobody wants it? What if I fail? And so playing it safe actually is our comfort zone, and that prevents us from failing, right? It prevents us from those risks, right? But playing it safe, it's not going to actually get you what you want, right? I spent many years playing it safe, right? For various reasons at different chapters in my career. Now, it was fine for me to settle at certain points in my career. Certainly when I was having my kiddos, right? I didn't think it was the right move to be out on my own trying to build a business when I needed something more safe, right? Safer. And so it is fine, obviously, to settle intentionally, right? I've made some intentional choices to settle over the years and do something where I was playing it safe. But at a certain point, the pain of the unfulfillment, the pain of being stuck, the pain of being disengaged and unfulfilled and uninspired and unmotivated by the role that you're stuck in, right? The misery of being stuck in a role that no longer fits. At some point, the pain of that situation becomes unbearable, right? And then you have to act. A mentor of mine told me this story. It's an anecdote about this concept, right? That at some point, the pain becomes unbearable and you have to act. So picture this. Old, beautiful house with a porch, and there's a man in a rocking chair rocking away on his porch, and his dog is laying beside him. Now his dog is yelping in pain. His dog is in fact going crazy, barking and howling and like wincing and clearly in pain. Now the man next door can hear this going on, and after a while he goes over to the neighbor's house to see what's going on. Because he's like, well, geez Louise, like this dog is clearly in pain. He's going crazy and he's wincing and yelping and howling. And so he says to the man, hey buddy, like your dog's going crazy. What's going on? And the man says, well, he's lying on a nail. And so the neighbor says, he's lying on a nail? Well, what the heck? Like this poor dog, he's yelping in pain. And the man says, well, when it's painful enough, he'll get off. Oh, there's a train. I don't know if you can hear it. So I love that anecdote because we all have choices. We are autonomous individuals as humans. We have agency over ourselves, over our choices in life. And if it's painful enough, we'll get off the nail, right? If it's painful enough, we'll act, we'll move, we'll make a different choice, right? And so this is what I'm saying to you about your situation. It might be absolutely miserable for you to be going into work every day because you hate it, because you're unhappy. It doesn't fulfill you anymore. And there's a lot of pain in that misery. And so you have to decide whether the fear of making the change outweighs the misery of staying in it. I can't answer that for you. I'm here for you when you're ready to make the change. Absolutely. And please reach out, book a career clarity call. I will help you work through that and we'll get to the other side together. I promise. But I can't drag you through, right? I can't drag you into something. You have to come willingly. You have to make that intentional choice to make a career change. So when the misery, when the pain of your situation is bad enough, you're going to act. You're going to get off the nail, right? When it's unbearable, your situation becomes unbearable, you will make a change. You will make a step. Now, what does that look like, right? So we know what the fear factor is, right? There's a ton of fear, right? What if it doesn't work out? What if I can't pay the bills? What if I end up homeless, right? What if? So I'm not denying that that fear exists. And we know biologically that our system is wired to have a fear response to that, right? Absolutely. And our fear response has kept us safe for a millennia, right? But is your fear holding you back? Is your fear keeping you stuck? You can only answer that. I can't answer that for you. But if your fear is holding you back, if your fear is keeping you stuck, then maybe it is time to make a change. Now, You don't have to take a giant leap forward and quit your job and blow up your life all at once, okay? I'm not saying that either. So here are some micro steps that will help reduce the overwhelm and reduce the fear. So let's start with just a couple of micro steps, okay? I would start by building a safety net. So if your job is starting to get miserable and it's starting to be unbearable, then I would start to build a bit of a safety net, because at some point your situation is going to become untenable and you will need to quit, or you will need to make a big move, a big leap. And so if you're in that zone where it's that quiet knowing, it's that quiet understanding that it's not the right fit anymore, start to build yourself a safety net. Well, how do you do that? Well, maybe it's a part-time gig. Maybe there's some side hustle going on. Maybe you're pulling back and you're budgeting differently for your household. But if you build a bit of a safety net and you have that cushion for yourself, ultimately then when you go to make that big change, when you go to make that big move, it will feel safer to do that. You'll feel more comfortable to do that. So that's a micro step that you can do to help reduce the anxiety or reduce the fear of making the big change. Another micro step you can do is start to test ideas quietly, right? Test them out. Maybe have a coffee with an old friend and say, hey, listen, like this is a thing I'm kind of thinking about, and test the waters. See how people react to it. Or maybe you test this idea out quietly on, maybe you have a social media handle that's not affiliated with you, but you test the idea out on an audience, right? To see if it sticks or see if it works. But take some action and test the ideas that you have quietly, just to see, right? Reduce some of the anxiety, reduce some of the overwhelm by taking action, taking steps. Another thing you can do as a micro step to reduce the overwhelm is to really set boundaries around the fearful thoughts. Now, I know that sounds a bit crazy because you're like, well, Kendra, the thoughts just come. Well, you are the thinker of your thoughts, right? At the end of the day, you can choose to think those thoughts or not. Like I can look out the window right now and I can choose to say, it's a beautiful day, or I can choose to think, it's a shitty day. I can choose what I think, right? You are the thinker of your thoughts. So what I would suggest right now in this moment with this fear factor, I would make an intentional choice to quiet your mind and set some boundaries around those fearful thoughts, right? Quiet that down, quiet the noise, and make some intentional choices to stop thinking the fearful thoughts. Now that's going to take some practice, that's going to take some time, but it is a micro step that you can take in setting boundaries around those fearful thoughts. The other thing that I'm going to suggest is make a shift in terms of your focus from the perfect plan to small progress. And what I mean by that is I think too often we get caught up in it has to be perfect before I can start. If I can't do it well, I'm not going to do it at all, right? It's this kind of like all or nothing thinking, right? And that keeps us stuck, right? Well, if I can't do it, I'm not going to do it at all, right? If I can't do it well, if I can't do it perfectly, and that's going to keep you stuck. That's going to keep perpetuating the fearful thoughts and the fear factor. So rather than focusing on the perfect plan, I would focus on small progress, just baby steps, right? Little shifts, little mindset shifts, reduce the fearful thoughts, take a little action, right? Start to test the waters, right? Maybe you volunteer in the area that you really want to be in, right? Maybe you kind of do that quietly. But taking some action, regardless of whether you think it's going to fail or not, but taking some action is going to ease the anxiety, right? Reduce that fear, and it's going to get you some progress. So really shift your mind from having this like perfect plan to making some small progress, right? That's going to really alleviate some of the fear. Now, let's talk about being scared, because listen, that's not going to go away necessarily. You are going to have to do it anyway. You're going to have to move anyway. You're going to have to do it scared, right? And that's just the God's honest truth, right? Because you can't be brave without fear, and everything that you want in life is on the other side of fear, right? The dream, the job where you're doing the thing you're meant to do, that's on the other side of fear. So at some point, right, you're gonna have, you can't just wait for the fear to magically go away, right? And you can't be brave without fear. So you're gonna have to move anyway. You need to move anyway. You need to do it scared. Now, you don't have to do the big leap, right? Like I said, you don't have to blow up your life yet. You just need to move. You just need to take some baby steps. And are you gonna be scared to fail? Of course, I get it. Me too. I'm scared this whole thing is gonna fail, right? But you have to move forward anyway. And it's hard to move forward when fear feels like a brick wall. I get it. So here's 3 things that you can do to adjust the fear or diminish the fear or reduce that fear response. So the number 1 thing is breathe. For goodness sakes, breathe. I think too often we stop breathing. I know it sounds crazy because you're still alive. Obviously, you're breathing. But the fear stops us. So I want you to take 5 slow, deep breaths. Breathe. That's going to help to clear the screen of your mind. That's going to help to jog you loose from the fear. The second thing, after you've taken some deep breaths, change your environment. Do a pattern interrupt. If you're in your office and you're freaking out, go for a walk around the block, right? If you're in your house and your husband's on your butt or your wife's on your butt because they don't think that you should do the big change and they're afraid of the financial instability and the risks involved, and they don't want to be disappointed in you and you don't want them to be disappointed in you either, and change your environment. Leave the environment. Go outside, right? But interrupt the pattern, interrupt what's happening, change your environment. That's going to go a long way to reducing the fear. And the third thing is take aligned action, right? Aligned action meaning take action aligned with your goal, right? If your goal is to get out of this job, if you're miserable, if you're unhappy, if you're unfulfilled and you hate going into work on a Monday, take some aligned action to make that different. It could be as small as booking a coffee date, right? Go on LinkedIn and find somebody that's in the industry that really excites you and invite them for a coffee, right? Something simple. Something small, but take some action, right? Maybe you offer to volunteer at an event where, or a conference where they're talking about the industry that you want to get into, right? Offer up your services. Be around, surround yourself with people that are doing the thing that you want to be doing. But take some kind of aligned action. a micro step, a small step forward, but actually take a step, right? It's not to say that the fear is not going to come back up. Of course it will. It's natural. It's normal. But I want you to normalize acting anyway. Move anyway. Do it scared. Do it scared, right? I'll tell you a quick story and then we'll wrap up. My husband was away, this is a couple weeks ago, he was overnight somewhere, and I was home alone with the kiddos. And again, we live in an old house, so lots of noises and creaks and blah, blah, blah. So I'm lying in our bed reading stories to the kids before they go to bed, and we hear this god-awful noise. Well, my husband's not home, it's just me, I'm the parent, I've got to go be brave. And I'm shitting a brick because what was the noise? What does this mean? What am I going to run into? Am I strong enough to overpower of course, my mind goes to worst case scenario. We're being broken into and, I'm going to have to, fight off a burglar or whatever. And my kids were scared. I was scared. And I realized in that moment, there's no other choice. I have to act. I have to get up. I have to go and investigate. And I'm going to have to do it scared. I can't stay here. That's no good. That's no good for the kids. It's no good for me. What if this is actually a predator or a burglar coming into my house? I have to go deal with it. Well, I'm going to have to deal with it scared because the fear's not going away. So I'm going to have to get out of this bed and act anyway, move anyway. So I want to end there on do it scared. The fear factor is ever present. I get it. And I get how overwhelming it is. Certainly, making a career change feels so scary and so overwhelming. But if you're miserable and unhappy and you dread going into work on Monday, that feeling is also not going away. So you're going to have to make a choice to say, is that pain unbearable yet? And if so, I'm going to have to make a change. I'm going to have to make a career change, and I'm probably going to have to do it scared. Okay? You're not alone though. So reach out for help, book a call. There's a link somewhere down there in the bio or in the caption. But book a career clarity call. I can help you move through the fear. I can help you take that aligned action, make those intentional moves, make those micro changes to ultimately get to what you want. But don't stay stuck in the misery of it, right? It will become unbearable at some point and your situation will become untenable and then you'll have to act. So I'm going to suggest you act sooner than later. Okay? And I'm here for you. Be well until we chat. All the best. Take care.